So, good afternoon to all. So, here is my topic, that is the theories of corrosion. Basically, there are three theories of corrosion. The first one is the acid theory of corrosion. Second one is the dry or the chemical theory of corrosion. Third one is the galvanic, wet, or the electrochemical theory of corrosion. So, coming to the first, that is the acid theory of corrosion. By the name itself, we can get to know that the acid causes the corrosion of the metals. So, this theory states that the acid causes the corrosion of the metals. For example, iron is corroded by the atmospheric CO2, moisture, and oxygen to form the mixture of the corrosion product, that is the ferrous bicarbonate and ferrous hydroxide. The reactions are given below. Here the iron reacts with the CO2, moisture, and O2 to give the ferrous bicarbonate, and the further reactions gives the mixture of these corrosion products. So next, coming to the dry or the chemical theory of corrosion. This theory states that the corrosion is due to the atmospheric gases such as oxygen, halogens, sulfur oxides, and nitrogen oxides, and also the fumes of the chemicals. So this theory also, by the name itself, we can get to know that the dry gases or the chemical fumes causes the corrosion of the metals. Example is the alkali and the alkaline earth metals react with the oxygen at room temperature and form the corresponding metal oxides. So coming to the next one, that is the electrochemical theory of corrosion. This type of corrosion occurs when a metal or two dissimilar metals, when they are fully or partially dipped in electrolyte or a conducting solution. Due to dipping of this metal partially or fully, a galvanic cell forms on the surface of the metal. So some part of the metal acts as anode and the rest acts as the cathode. And whatever the chemicals and the humidity which is present in the atmosphere, those act like an electrolyte, which causes the oxidation of the anodic part and the reduction of the cathode. And the formation of the corrosion product is between the anode and the cathode. So here we can note that the anode basically gets corroded, and the corrosion product is between anode and the cathode. Now coming to the mechanism of this corrosion. So to happen this corrosion, there should be a conducting liquid in which the metal should be dipped, and when the two dissimilar metals or the alloys, when they're immersed or dipped in a solution, the corrosion occurs due to the existence of the separate anodic and the cathodic regions, between which the current flows through the electrolyte. So to understand this wet theory, so let us take the example of the corrosion of the iron. We know that in a galvanic cell or a concentration cell, at anode oxidation takes place and at cathode reduction takes place. So by taking the rusting of the iron as an example, we know that at anode oxidation takes place. That is, the iron gets dissolved into the ferrous ions and liberating 2 electrons. But at cathode, the reduction takes place at 2 ways. The first case is the evolution of H2, and the second case is the absorption of O2. These are the 2 cases at cathode. First case, coming to the first case, that is the evolution of H2. It occurs in the acidic environment and in the absence of oxygen. And we know the anodic reaction, that is the dissolution of FeS ferrous ions and liberating 2 electrons. And these 2 electrons, they flow from anode to cathode, where the H plus is eliminated as H2 gas. So the cathodic reaction will be 2H plus 2 electrons gives evolution of H2. So the overall reaction will be Fe plus 2H plus gives ferrous ions and liberation of H2 gas. So in this type of corrosion, the anodic area is large and the cathodic area is small. And whatever the metals which are placed above the hydrogen in the electrochemical series, such as copper, gold, etc., they show this type of corrosion. Here we can look at the picture. There is a small cathodic area and large anodic area, and the electrons flow from anode to cathode to give H2, liberation of H2 gas, and this is in the presence of the acidic electrolyte where H plus ions are dissolved. Now coming to the absorption of O2. This is the second case where the corrosion takes place in the basic or a neutral medium and in the presence of oxygen. Whereas the evolution of H2 is in the absence of oxygen and in the acidic medium. So when the iron is covered with an oxide, when there is a small scratch or a cut on the surface of the metal, that small part acts as an anode and the rest acts as cathode. So we know the anodic reaction, that is dissolution of ferrous ions and liberation of 2 electrons. And now coming, and these two electrons, they flow from anode to cathode, where they react with the O2 and moisture to give OH minus ions. And the metal ions and the non-metal ions, that is Fe plus 2 ions and OH minus ions, they diffuse to form ferrous hydroxide precipitate. And when there is enough O2 present, when there is more oxygen present, this ferrous hydroxide precipitates get further oxidized to ferric hydroxide. And this is called the yellow rust. And when there is very less O2, and when there is very less O2 or O2 is limited, the corrosion product might be a black anhydrous magnetite, that is Fe3O4. We can look here, when there is a metal covered with an oxide film or covered with an oxide, when there is a small cut or a scratch, this part acts as anode and the rest part acts as cathode, and the rust is formed here, and the electrons move from anode to cathode to give OH minus ions, and this OH minus ions and the ferrous ions diffuse to form ferrous hydroxide, that is a precipitate, or the rust is formed here between the anode and the cathode. Thank you, sir. That's it. Hello? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. pH, sir. Yeah, when the environment is acidic, evolution of H2 takes place, sir. And when it is basic, absorption of O2, that kind of reaction mechanism takes place at cathode. The same one, sir. Absorption of O2 thing only will take place at cathode. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, am I audible? Sir, is my screen visible? Yes, sir, I have shared my screen. Sir, is it visible now? Good afternoon, everyone. My topic is types of corrosion. As we have learned something about wet or electrochemical corrosion in the previous presentation, now let's have a glance of some points which may help us to understand the topic better. And let's get started. Wet or electrochemical corrosion. It is possible only in the presence of moisture, hence it is known as wet corrosion. And it is known as electrochemical corrosion because the tiny electrochemical cells settle on the surface of the metal, hence it is known as electrochemical corrosion. This corrosion occurs only on heterogeneous surface but not on homogeneous surface. That is, heterogeneity is necessary to occur wet corrosion. And some forms of wet corrosion are galvanic corrosion and waterline corrosion, which we are going to learn in the next slides. And try to remember these points which we use in the next slides. And let's get into galvanic corrosion. Galvanic corrosion is also known as bimetallic corrosion. When two dissimilar metals or alloys are electrically connected and exposed to an electrolyte, forms a galvanic cell. As we know about galvanic cell, as we have studied in our intermediate level how a galvanic cell is formed, and among them the active metal gets corroded and the passive one will remain unaffected. To understand this better, let us consider zinc copper couple, and the standard reduction potential of zinc is minus 0.76 and standard reduction potential of copper is 0.34. Here we can see the galvanic cell in which zinc and copper are electrically connected and exposed to an electrolyte. According to electrochemical series, the metal which is above hydrogen or the one which with positive SRP acts as anode, and the one which is below hydrogen in the electrochemical series acts as cathode, and it has negative SRP value, right? Now here zinc acts as anode, hence it undergo oxidation which gives Zn+2 and loses 2 electrons. Actually, according to electrochemical series, here copper has to undergo reduction as it is cathode. But practically this doesn't happen. Here there are very good oxidants than copper in our environment, that are H plus ions and oxygen molecules. As we have learned in previous presentation, when the electrolyte is in acidic medium, H plus ions acts as cathode, and when the electrolyte is in neutral or basic medium, O2 molecules acts as cathode. Now we have learned in the first slide that since it is a wet or electrochemical corrosion, moisture it occurs in the moist condition. That is, moisture is present on the surface of the metal. It undergo oxidation. Here you can see zinc and copper couple, and the moisture is present on the surface of the zinc copper couple. Here zinc acts as anode, but here copper doesn't act as cathode. And since zinc is an anode, oxidation takes place and the reaction is given by zinc gives rise to Zn plus 2 plus 2 electrons. We have learned that apart from copper, there are good oxidants in our environment. That they are H plus ions and oxygen molecules. Since the water molecules, the moisture present on the zinc copper couple acts as electrolyte, that is nothing but simple water. Since water is neutral, here oxygen molecule acts as cathode. And we have got the reaction at anode. Now let us see the reaction at cathode. And the oxygen in the atmosphere reacts with the moisture, and the electrons which have been liberated at anode will be absorbed by the cathode to give 2 moles of hydroxide ion, and the zinc Zn plus 2 diffuses with 2 hydroxide ions to give zinc hydroxide, which is nothing but the corrosion product. This is how galvanic corrosion is formed. And now let's learn about waterline corrosion. Waterline corrosion, it is also known as differential aerated corrosion or concentration cell corrosion. At the end of this corrosion, we come to know why this has been named as waterline corrosion or differential aerated corrosion or concentration cell corrosion. Now, in this corrosion, metal is exposed to varying concentration of oxygen. Varying concentration of oxygen. To understand this sentence better, let us take an example. Here is a beaker which is filled with water and a zinc rod which is half immersed in it. Now the above part, the part of a zinc rod which is above water is more aerated. That is, the concentration of oxygen on the zinc rod that is above water is more, and it is more aerated, and it acts as oxidant. That is, it itself undergo reduction by oxidizing other substance. That means it behaves as a cathode here, and it forces the anode, the other part, the remaining part, to act as anode here. Now the part of the zinc rod which is immersed in the water is less aerated. That is, the concentration of oxygen on the zinc rod which is immersed in the water is less. Now my question is here, whether the entire part of the zinc rod which is immersed in water will act as anode, or whether some part of it act as anode. Could anybody respond? As we have completed this topic earlier, I hope some answer from you. Am I audible? Okay, let me continue. We have learned in the first slide that to occur wet or electrochemical corrosion, heterogeneity is necessary, right? But when we consider this part, it is entirely filled with water. So here entirely homogeneity is present, but there is no heterogeneity. But when you observe, this is the water line, and here air molecules are present just above the water line, and here water molecules are present just below the water line. Just above water line air molecules are present, and just below water line water molecules are present. That means here heterogeneity is present only at the water level. Only at the water level. In order to undergo wet corrosion, heterogeneity is needed. Heterogeneity is present just above and below the water line. As uh, heterogeneity is present there, only that portion acts as anode, undergo corrosion. Now here, due to varying concentration of air, because the concentration of air is more at the part of the zinc that is above the water line and less when compared to the one which is below the water line. Since the concentration of air is varying, it is known as differential aeration corrosion, and the concentration of oxygen varies on different parts. That is why it is also known as concentration cell corrosion, and the heterogeneity is present just above and below the water line. Therefore, it is known as waterline corrosion. I hope it is clear to you all. Let's get into the last one, that is nothing but pitting corrosion. The formation of cavities or cracks on the surface of the metal leads to the formation of small anodic and large cathodic areas on the metal surface, which results the corrosion at specific points. The corrosion produced referred as pit, and the phenomenon is known as pitting corrosion. The pitting corrosion preferably takes place in the chloride medium. Now let's understand these points in a better way. Suppose let us take an iron rod. Generally, it consists of some pits, holes, that is, which cannot be seen with our naked eye but visible under microscopic level. And this pit is filled with dust and sand, and hence it is closed. Now the portion, this part is not exposed to air. That is, the concentration of oxygen is less here, and when when you consider this surface level and this part, it is exposed to oxygen. That is, oxygen content is more and it behaves as oxidant. That means it itself undergoes reduction to oxidize other one, and it behaves as cathode, right? Now this behaves as anode here, as the concentration of oxygen is less. Now the reaction at anode will be Fe gives rise to Fe+2 by losing 2 electrons. Here the oxygen, as it is exposed to oxygen, the oxygen is more here. This oxygen will react to the moisture present in the environment by gaining the electrons which have been liberated at anode to form 2 hydroxide ion. And this is the reaction that is formed at anode. Now the net reaction, the Fe+2 diffuses with 2 hydroxide ion to give FeOH taken twice, which is our corrosion product. This is how pitting corrosion takes place. I hope you gain something from my presentation. Thank you. Sir?
Yes, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. My topic is about uh, corrosion control methods and cathodic protection. So, before starting the topic, let me just give you a brief information uh, regarding the galvanic corrosion. So, the galvanic corrosion is almost similar to the galvanic cell. Here, we can observe a cathode, an anode, and electrolyte. So, in this case, this brass screw acts as a cathode and the steel nut acts as anode. And the electrolyte here is the moisture and the chemicals present in the atmosphere. So, as we can observe from the picture, this steel nut undergoes oxidation and transfers electrons to the brass screw. So, as this undergoes oxidation, this is considered as anode, and the brass screw is considered as cathode. Hence, we can come to a conclusion that corrosion is always concentrated at the anodic part of the cell. Now, let's continue with the topic: corrosion control methods. As we have learned in the corrosion theory, the corrosion product is always formed at the anodic part of the galvanic cell. So, in order to prevent a metal from corroding, we need to transform it into a cathode, as the corrosion only takes place at anode. This process is called cathodic protection. Now, in this presentation, we will learn about two types of corrosion control methods. They are sacrificial anodic protection method and impressed current cathodic protection method. So now let us first start with the sacrificial anodic protection method. So in this method, let us consider two different types of metals, metal 1 and metal 2. But first, we need to make sure that the metal 2 is more active or more reactive than the metal 1. In this method, the metal 1, which is to be prevented from corrosion, is considered as cathode, and the another sacrificial metal 2 is considered as anode. Both metal 1 and metal 2 are connected through a conductor. Here, electrons travel from metal 2 to metal 1. As metal 2 loses electrons, it undergoes oxidation, whereas metal 1 gains electrons and undergoes reduction. So metal 2 acts as anode, and all the corrosion gets concentrated here and prevents the metal 1 from corroding. So now let us have a real life example of sacrificial anodic protection. So this is mainly used for protecting the metallic pipelines which are buried underground. So let us assume this cylindrical metal pipe as the metal which is to be protected, and this is the connecting wire, and this silver plate is the sacrificial anode. This can either be a zinc plate or aluminum plate or a magnesium plate, depending upon the metal and the environment. So here, as zinc, aluminum or magnesium are highly reactive, they undergo oxidation and act as anode. Instead of this metal being corroded, they sacrifice themselves and save this metal. Hence, these are named as sacrificial anodic protection, sacrificial anodes. These anodes get corroded frequently and they need to be replaced. And application of sacrificial anodic protection. These are used in ships to protect the hull from corroding by connecting it to zinc or magnesium sheets. So as we can observe in this picture, this is the part of the ship which is in direct contact with the sea water. So this red metal which might be corroded is prevented by these silver plates attached to the ship. So these silver plates are either zinc or magnesium sheets. They sacrifice themselves in order to protect the surface of the ship, and they are also used to protect the pipelines and water tanks which are underground, as you can see in these pictures. Here the magnesium sheet gets corroded instead of this underground pipe, as we have discussed earlier, and these plates or sheets need to be replaced frequently, and they are also used to protect the interior part of boilers. They are either sacrificial anodes are plated around this interior of the tanker, or an anode of this is placed inside the tanker. So now let us get into another topic, impressed current cathodic method. This method is used when sacrificial anodic method is no longer feasible. To understand this method, we need to know about the corrosion current. In galvanic corrosion, there is transfer of electrons from anode to cathode. This transfer of electrons causes corrosion. As you can see in the picture, there is a current between anode and the cathode. So, in order to prevent the metal from corrosion, direct current of magnitude equal to the corrosion current is passed through the metal in the opposite direction, which nullifies the effect of corrosion. As we can see in this picture, this is the metal which is to be protected, and the negative part of the DC power source is connected to this metal piece. For this method, an inert anode is selected. Always the negative terminal of the battery is connected to the protected structure, which we can see here. The current passed through the cathode is called impressed current. The inert anode used for this process is graphite or platinized tin. The inert anode is buried in backfill. This is a mixture of gypsum, coke, breeze, sodium sulfate. This backfill is used for good electric contact. See, this part is called the backfill, and the anode is buried in this area. So these are the applications of impressed current cathodic protection. It is used in large structures like bridges and skyscrapers because sacrificial anodes need to be replaced frequently, and it is not feasible in the case of bridges and skyscrapers and large water storage tanks. It is also used in ship hulls which travel for long distances. Ship hulls use either of the methods, whichever is feasible to them. That's it. Thank you. Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. I am present in my school. Sir, can you see my screen? Good afternoon, sir. My topic is on methods of coating, hot dipping, galvanization, and cleaning. Hot dipping. It is applicable to metals having higher melting point than the coating method. In this method, the base metal is immersed or dipped into the hot molten coating metal. If the melting point of the base metal is less than the coating metal, then the base metal will melt. That's the reason the melting point of the base metal should be greater than the melting point of the coating metal. Hot dipping involves immersing metals such as steel or iron into kettle or bath of molten zinc. This process is inherently simple, which provides a distinct advantages over other corrosion protection methods, and moreover, it is more economical than other corrosion protection methods. Galvanization. Galvanization is a process consists of three basic steps: surface preparation, galvanizing, and inspection. Surface preparation. This surface preparation method is the most important step in the application of any coating. This step in the galvanizing process has its own built-in means of quality control because zinc simply will not react with unclean steel. Any failures or inadequacies in surface preparation will be immediately apparent when the steel is withdrawn from the zinc bath, because the unclean areas remain uncoated and immediate corrective action can be taken. Surface preparation for galvanizing consists of three steps. The first step is degreasing. A hot alkali solution, mild acidic bath, or a biological cleaning bath removes organic contaminants such as dirt, paint markings, grease, and oil from the metal surface. Epoxies, vinyls, asphalt, or welding slag, which cannot be removed by degreasing, must be removed before galvanizing by grit blasting, sandblasting, or other mechanical means. And then we go to the next step, pickling. A dilute solution of heated sulfuric acid or ambient hydrochloric acid removes mild scale and iron oxide from the steel surface. As an alternative to or in conjunction with pickling, this step can also be accomplished using abrasive cleaning or air blasting, sand, metallic shot, or grit onto the steel. The third step of the galvanizing is fluxing. The final surface preparation step in the galvanizing process is a zinc ammonium chloride solution serves two purposes. It removes any remaining oxides and deposits a protective layer on the steel to prevent any further oxides from forming on the surface prior to immersion in the molten zinc. Here we go with the step of galvanizing, and during the actual galvanizing step of the process, the melting material is completely immersed in a bath of molten zinc. The bath chemistry is specified and requires at least 98% pure zinc melted at 840 Fahrenheit or 449 degrees centigrade. While immersed in the kettle, the zinc reacts with the iron in the steel to form a series of zinc or iron intermetallic alloy layers. Once the fabricated items coating growth is complete, they are withdrawn slowly from the galvanizing bath and the excess zinc is removed by draining, vibrating, and or by centrifuging. Here the last step in the galvanization is inspection. The inspection of hard dipped galvanized steel is simple and quick. The two processes of the hard dipped galvanized coating closely scrutinized are coating thickness and coating appearance. A variety of simple physical and laboratory tests may be performed to determine thickness, uniformity, adherence, and appearance. Galvanized iron is used in automobiles, roofing sheet, lampposts, etc. And moreover, galvanization process is a anodic coating. These are the steps involved in galvanizing process, and the first process is casting cleaning and then rinsing the base metal. Then again, base metal is dipped into the pickling process. Then rinsing with again and it is again dipped into the flux solution. Then drying it for some time, and finally the base metal is dipped into the hard molten zinc bath. Then the further step is cooling and inspection. Here we go with the next topic, tinning. The process of coating a thin layer of tin or molten tin on copper or brass is called tinning. Cooking vessels made up of copper and brass get a greenish coating due to corrosion. The greenish substance is copper carbonate and it is poisonous. If buttermilk or curry is placed in such a vessel, it gets spoiled. Therefore, these vessels are coated with tin to prevent corrosion. The clean steel article or sheet passes through molten tin bath, maintained at 240 degrees centigrade, and thrown through palm oil. Palm oil protects the hot tin coated surface against corrosion. The rollers finally remove excess of tin and makes a uniform coating. Tin is cathodic coating. Here we see the applications of tinning, and these are the applications which we see in our daily life. Tin containers can be used for storing foods, ghee, oils, pickles, and medicines. Copper weights before installation by rubber are tin to avoid attack of sulfur of rubber. Tin, copper, or brass vessels or sheets are used for cooking utensils and refrigeration equipments. Here in the picture, we can see how the hot dipping tinning process is taken place, and this is the procedure of hot dipping tinning process. First, the milled steel is passed into the pickling, and then through rollers, it is passed into the ZnCl2 flux solution, and again with the help of rollers, this is thrown into the palm oil or grease. This palm oil removes the excess of acids and oxides formed on the metal. Then finally, tin steel is obtained. Thank you. Yes, sir. Because, sir, because tin is present on the top of the electrochemical series. So, in order to avoid any, if it reacts with hydro, other than tin, all the metals are react with hydrogen with moisture, sir. So, tinning is preferred most. Because it is placed above the electrochemical series in the electrochemical series. Sorry, sir, I couldn't get you. Sir. Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My topic is metallic coatings and electrolyte plating of copper. Metallic coatings come into category of the metal coating. The metallic coat. I'm audible, sir? Hello. Yeah. Metallic coatings come under category of protective coatings. First, let us discuss what is protective coating. Protective coatings are used to protect the metal surface from environment. It acts as barrier between environment and metal surface. Protective coatings impart some mechanical properties for the surface of metal such as hardness, electrical properties and thermal insulating properties. They help the metal from corroding. First, let us know about the metallic coatings. Metallic coatings is a protective coating applied on metal surface by another metal. Like zinc is coated on iron, and it is like protective barrier between atmosphere and metal. The basic requirements of metal used for coating are: the metal must be chemically inert with the environment. If the metal is not inert, then it will react with the atmosphere and it will damage the coating. And it should prevent the penetration of environment into the metal. If not, the environment goes into the metal and again corrosion takes place. Metallic coatings are basically classified into two categories. They are anodic coatings and cathodic coatings. First, let us know about the anodic coatings. Anodic coatings are produced by metals which have less electrode potential than base metal. That is, SRP of coated metal should be less than the SRP of base metal. Example, zinc is coated on iron. We know that zinc has lower SRP than iron. Here zinc acts as anode, so it will not corrode, and Fe acts as cathode. The zinc will corrode and Fe acts as cathode, so iron will not corrode. And let us know about the cathodic coating. Cathodic coatings are produced by metals which have higher electrode potential than base metal. That is, the SRP of coated metal should be greater than the SRP of base metal. Example, tin is coated on iron, as tin has higher SRP than iron. We know that. First, let us go into brief on anodic coating. Metal coating is said to be anodic coating if SRP of coated metal is less than the base metal. Example, zinc over iron. It is also called as galvanization. In this process, the metal is immersed in a molten coating metal. That is, the coating metal first is melted and the metal is immersed in the molten metal. If any crack or pit is formed on the coated metal acts as anode and the base metal acts as cathode. Since the anode will corrode as base metal will be safe, so iron will not corrode in galvanization. If any pit or crack is formed, there will be no problem as it will not corrode. Galvanized utensils are not used for cooking as zinc is toxic for us, so we use the tinned metals. This is an example of galvanized steel. Here the steel is galvanized by zinc. Here it is not galvanized, thus it is rusted, it is corroded. Let's know about the cathodic coating. Here the base metal is coated with metal having higher potential than the base metal. Here the metal is coated with metal having higher potential than the base metal. That is, the SRP of coated metal is greater than the base metal. Cathodic coatings are more effective than anodic coatings when they are free from pits and pores. If not, they will be more affected than without coating. Example, coating of tin on iron. It is also called as tinning. The cathodic coating should be continuous and uniform without cracks or pits. It's important to note that discontinuity of base metal, that is cracks or pits, cause damage higher than the metal without coating. It's better to do not coat if it has any pits or something. This is an example of that. Here the tin is coated on the iron. It is also called as tinning. Now let us know about the electroless plating of copper. In electroless plating, we do not use any electricity. We just use the salt solution of the metal. Here we use the salt solution of copper. Electroless plating, it is also called as autocatalytic process. In electroless plating, without making use of electricity, metals are deposited from its salt solution on a catalytic active surface of base metal. Here the surface should be catalytically active. We can also coat non-conductors by electroless plating by making the surface catalytically active by using palladium chloride and tin chloride. In this method, a suitable reducing agent is used for thin uniform coating on the base metal. The reducing agent supplies electrons for reduction of metal ions, and metal gets deposited on the surface by producing uniform thin coating. Here we can see that the metal plus reducing agent, metal deposit and oxidation product. Here the metal ions, the reducing agent supplies electrons to metal ions, then the metal deposits on the metal base metal. and the reducing agent will oxidize. Advantages of electrolyte splitting: electricity is not required, and also non-conductors can also be coated by using palladium chloride and tin chloride with HCl. The deposits are adherent. Adherent means where they are strongly binded and very compact, and objects of any shape can be coated. Now let us go into brief on electrolyte splitting of copper. There are two steps especially. The first step is pre-treatment of surface, making the surface optical. They are active surfaces. Iron, cobalt, nickel can be directly plated because they are already active. Non-conductors as glass, plastic, ceramics are first activated in tin chloride and HCl, followed by drying in palladium chloride. On drying, the palladium layer is formed on the surface. Step 2 is the bath composition. This is the main step of the bath composition in copper electrolyte splitting is the copper sulfate used as coating solution, and formaldehyde is a reducing agent. PDTA is complexing agent, and buffer used to maintain pH level. The buffer is NaOH with Rochelle salt at temperature 25 degrees Celsius. The process: the reduction of cupric 2 ion to thin metallic copper at controlled rate takes place. It is nothing but it also failing test of formaldehyde. Here the copper 2 ions react with formaldehyde in basic medium. The formaldehyde will be oxidized, and the copper 2 ion will be deposited as copper on the base metal. Example, we can see this on circuit boards, in motherboards, in TVs or computers, PCBs, printed circuit boards. Here the copper is finely plated like this. Yeah, we can't use wires in motherboards, and so they are used electrolyte copper plating. The limitations of electrolyte splitting: high cost of chemicals, and the coating rate is very slow, and the solution stability is poor. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. One minute. Good afternoon to everyone. Sir, can you hear me? Good afternoon to everyone. My topic is about chirality, symmetry, and absolute configuration. First topic is about chirality. Chirality is the property of being non-identical to one's mirror image. Chirality is a true or false state property and we can define it for any object. Kair in Greek means hand. Just our right hand is a non-superimposable mirror image of left hand. That is non-superimposable mirror image is called chiral. Here we can see that left hand mirror image of left hand is right hand, but they are not superimposable. This is an example for chirality. Uh, a molecule is said to be chiral if it is superimposable on its mirror image. If it is not a chiral, if it is superimposable on its mirror image. A molecule is said to be chiral if it contains at least one symmetric carbon. It should not contain any of the elements of symmetry. We can see here a chiral objects like a flask. For example, a flask. Mirror image of flask is a flask itself. It can be superimposed. This is an example for achiral objects. Symmetry elements. There are 3 elements of symmetry: plane of symmetry, center of symmetry, axis of symmetry. 4 elements of symmetry: plane of symmetry, center of symmetry, axis of symmetry, alternating axis of symmetry. First one, plane of symmetry. The plane that splits an object into 2 identical halves is called a plane of symmetry. For example, here we can see that with this red line, this is as a plane. Consider it as a plane. It splits into 2 objects with same identical halves. Second one, center of symmetry. It is a point in a molecule. A line drawn through this point from any atom or group to the end results in the presence of identical group or atom at the opposite end. In this example, we can see that hydrogen to hydrogen we can draw an imaginary line, and then this OH group to this OH group we can draw an imaginary line. This is the center of symmetry we can see by drawing imaginary lines. Third one, axis of symmetry. If a molecule is rotated by an angle of 360 by n degree to an axis, results in a new structure which is same as the original molecule. We can see here in this example, by rotating this molecule 180 degree, we can get the same molecule. The degree of this atom is 2, that is 360 by 2. Fourth one, alternating axis of symmetry. If a molecule is rotated by an angle of 360 by n degree through an axis, results in a structure which is different from the original molecule. New structure upon reflection in a plane perpendicular to the axis results in a structure same as the original molecule. In this example, we can see that by rotating this methane molecule 90 degrees, the hydrogen, take an example as H1. H1, which is present in the same plane, goes behind upward to the plane, towards us, that is towards us. Upon reflection in a plane perpendicular to this axis, we can get the same molecule as the previous one, as the original molecule we already have. Optical activity. The phenomenon of rotating plane polarized light is known as optical activity. The compounds exhibiting this property are known as optically active compounds. Study of optically active compounds shows that only those compounds which possess non-superimposable mirror image of original molecule are able to rotate the plane polarized light. In order to exhibit optical activity, the compound must be chiral. As we already discussed what is chirality. Optically active compounds doesn't possess any of the element of symmetry. Compounds which are mirror images of each other are known as enantiomers. They resemble each other in their physical and chemical properties, except that they rotate the plane polarized light in opposite directions. Most chiral compounds have a chiral center in which an atom is bonded to 4 different atoms or groups. If the group attached to a carbon are the same, then the molecule is no longer chiral and optical activity disappears. Absolute configuration. Stereoisomers are characterized by arrangement of atoms or groups of a compound. This arrangement is called the configuration of the stereoisomers. A compound may have same configuration but different kind of rotation. Hence, the stereoisomer is best recognized by the configuration, not by sign of rotation. Rules for absolute configuration. The first one, the order of priority is determined on the basis of atomic numbers of the atoms that are directly attached to the chiral carbon. Greater the atomic number results in higher priority. In this example, we can see that if we consider this chiral carbon, first priority goes to the OH group, which because oxygen has the highest uh, atomic number compared to carbon, hydrogen, and carbon, and the second priority goes to this uh, chiral carbon because it is attached to another OH group and methyl, and the third priority goes to the methyl. Anyway, the fourth priority goes to the hydrogen atom. Here we can see that it follows anti-clockwise direction, rotation. And second rule, in the presence of two atoms of same element, the heavier isotope will have higher priority. Here we can see that we have hydrogen and deuterium. We have to give higher priority to deuterium when we have hydrogen and deuterium. If the two because deuterium has more atomic weight compared to hydrogen. If third rule, if the two atoms attached to the carbon are the same, rule 1 is not applicable. Priority in such cases is determined by comparing the next atom in the group. Here we can see that considering this as chiral carbon, only this is the chiral carbon present here. Here is the methyl group and here is the methyl group, but this is attached to another methyl group. So the priority is given to this carbon compared to this one. Fourth rule, if the chiral carbon is attached to doubly or triply bonded atom, then the atom is considered equivalent to 2 or 3 single bonded atoms in determining the priority. Here in this example we see that double bonded X is equal to 2 single bonded X. In these atoms are called as phantom atoms. Triple bonded X is equivalent to 3 single bonded atoms X. Fifth rule, in Fisher projection, if the lowest priority group is on the vertical line, then S configuration is for anti-clockwise direction, R configuration is for clockwise direction. If the lowest priority group is on the horizontal line, then S configuration is for clockwise direction and R configuration is for anti-clockwise direction. Conformational analysis of N-butane. Conformations of N-butane are shown below as dimethyl ethene. By fixing one of the carbon atoms and rotating the other around the bond, one can get several configurations. If we consider this carbon, what's okay, sir. If we consider this, if we fix this carbon atom and rotate the other carbon atom present behind this carbon, we can get all these configurations. The conformation 1, in which two methyl groups are very much close, is called fully eclipsed, and the conformation 4, in which they are farthest apart, is called fully staggered or antiform. Here we can see that conformation 1, which is full eclipse form, and the conformation 4, in which methyl groups are farther apart, is called anti-conformation. Conformation 3 and 5 are known as partially eclipsed, whereas conformation 2 and 6 are partially staggered or Gauch or skew form. Here we can see that 2 and 4 are Gauch conformations and 3 and 5 are eclipsed conformations. In the case of N-butane, one fully eclipsed conformation and two partially staggered conformations are observed. One fully staggered or anti-conformation and two gauge or skew conformation are present. 2 and 4 conformations and are mirror images of each other. In the case of anti-staggered form, 4 CH3H and 2 HH interactions, that is 6 interactions are possible. In fully eclipsed form, greater steric effects are there. In the gauge conformation, 1 CH3 bond and 2 CH3 H bond, 3 HH interactions are present. The order of magnitude of interaction, we can see that CH3 interactions are greater than CH3H interactions are greater than HH interactions. The relative stabilities of all these conformations are shown below. Here we can see that in anti-periplanar, that is anti-conformation, the methyl groups are far apart, so interactions are very less. In eclipse form, we can see that here also the CH3H is CH3H interactions will be there. In gauge form, CH3 interactions are more, steric effect will be greater than all the conformations here. When we observe the above potential energy diagram, the following conclusions can be made. Here all the three peaks are not present at the same height. One peak is presented higher than the other two present at the same height. The three valleys are also not present at the same height. Two are present at one height and the third one at lower height. Thus, in N-butane, the most preferred conformation is the anti-conformation. Therefore, the molecule will tend to remain in this conformation. Thank you.